I believe, in the series of the ACSI Best Practices webinar. And today we're focusing on the development of the state plan. And we're muting all of you as we entered the webinar. So we typically have been leaving questions at the end. So if you have questions for the specific presenters, if you could write down, and then we'll take them at the end. And at that point, you can either chat them in, or if you have a question, you can raise your hand, and we will unmute you. So welcome. The presenters for the webinar today are Dawn Boyce in Idaho, and Dawn is having some technical problems, so we're going to have her go a little bit later, so she won't be starting. Adrian Angel with Illinois, Andy Grewell with Minnesota, and Katie Castern with Wisconsin. And Bill wasn't able to join us today. Or is he on, Kate, do you know? Unable to join us. So, and then myself and Kate Blunt. So the goal of this webinar is to provide you all at state offices with some ideas and strategies and best and promising practices regarding the development of the state plan. So we're going to focus on the extent of local agency involvement in the process as you at your state office develop the state plan. We're going to be focusing on the caliber of the opportunities provided to the local agencies when developing the plan, and the degree to which the state plan reflects the information and the suggestions that you get back from your local agencies. And so we're going to be providing an overview of the best practices work group. So for some of you who've been on the previous two webinars, you've heard this before, so I'll move through it fairly quickly so we can get to the good stuff. Kate Blunt will be focusing on the ACSI and continuous improvement, specifically around the development of the state plan and what we learned from the ACSI. And then, of course, we're going to have the best practices from the state offices. And then, again, as I mentioned, we'll be answering any questions that you may have. So I'll do a brief overview of the work group. Now, the work group started meeting in the spring, in May. So we met for several times over the summer, and then we presented at the conference, which I'll talk a little bit about meeting, or as we move further along. But as you can see here, these were all the areas that were scored by the ACSI. So the work group went through all of these sub-work groups, I guess I should say, and today we're going to focus on the development of the state plan. So here you can see those folks, so those at the state offices that comprise the work group. So we had California, Colorado, Idaho, Illinois, Iowa, Kansas, Minnesota, Nebraska, Nevada, South Dakota, Vermont, Virginia, and Wisconsin. And as I mentioned before, maybe I didn't mention and have mentioned in the past, that some of the state offices, it wasn't necessarily that they scored high in every area that was scored by the ACSI, but they scored high in at least one of those areas. So some states participated in one subgroup and some participated in more. So as I mentioned, we first met as a group, and then what we decided to do is that we would meet and we established the subgroups for each of those areas that were scored. So the subgroups then continued to meet over the summer, and they shared with each other examples and approaches and strategies that they felt gave them the high scores in that area. And then some of the other state offices who are a part of the work group were able to participate as well if they wanted to. And what we knew what we were going to do at the very beginning is that we were going to share these best practices and these ideas and strategies with the entire network of state offices. So what we first did is at our NASCAS conference that we had in September, we did a session on linkages and communication. So we did that session in person with 3 or 4 state office staff, and then we repeated that for the most part, though we were able to get into a little bit more detail via webinar. So that was the first webinar we did last month. And this is the third one. And just to let you know that before I turn this over to Kate, that we are recording all of them and we are sending them out, and we'll be posting them on our website. So if you missed some of the previous ones, you'll be able to listen to the recording as well as we're sharing the presentation too. So that, I'm going to turn it over to Kate Blunt, and she's going to talk a little bit more about continuous improvement with the ACSI and what we heard back from the eligible entities.
Thank you. Let's see the first slide then. OCS is using the ACSI to help both it and the states focus on improvement efforts to become more effective in each of the areas that were surveyed, and Jackie just showed you that list, which kind of parallel the state accountability measures. As you know, continuous improvement kind of involves 3 things. You get customer feedback, you got to have a baseline. You know where you're starting from, and that's what we did in 2015. Then make some changes and measure again. So we met again in this survey in 2017, and we'll start this cycle again and measure again in 2019. What I does is provide you with some data and comments so you focus your change efforts. And each of the states got their own individual reports, so you know where to focus and have some ideas about what needs to be done. And hopefully these webinars are offering you some ideas for what states might do differently. And that's in the next survey is in 2019, so that gives you enough time to make some changes and hopefully have some impact. So showing this slide that's in front of you now, each of the webinars, because this is sort of the summary of the entire national picture. And it's kind of one slide, see what it's all about. So the customer satisfaction index, as you see in the middle, is at 71. That's a 6-point increase over the 2015 score, which means that a lot of states, in fact 14, showed significant improvement in their scores, and many other states showed improvements likewise. And every area, every thing measured, which is along the left-hand side, those 7 areas, also showed improvement. So it's a significant change for the network. Next. Whoop. So one here, I'm sorry, my went blank. Let me get this back up. So what you're seeing is the CSI for the CSI, as you know, is of 3 different measurements: overall satisfaction, satisfaction compared to expectations, and satisfaction compared to the ideal. And every one of these went up, which is a significant thing. Obviously, overall satisfaction went up more than the rest, but all of these are quite a good show of improvement. Next. Look specifically at development of the state plan, which is what we're talking about today. So things to know here is that this saw a significant difference from 50 to 59. It still is the lowest scoring area, but it is, as I mentioned, a significant improvement. The impact is still somewhat low. It's a 0.3. It's not as important as linkages, communication, or grant monitoring. But in some states where those other areas are doing better, this is an area to focus on. All the components that were measured, caliber of opportunities, reflects your input, and extent of involvement, also showed significant increases, which says a lot. The final 2, however, reflects your input and extent of involvement, still are below 60. So our areas where there is some focus on might be able to show some significant increase. In terms of development of the state plan, the state scores ranged from 18 is the lowest score, all the way up to 76. 76 is an okay score, But in terms of some of the other areas, it's sort of mediocre. In some of the other areas, we scored 80s and 90s. This is an interesting thing, but again, it's a somewhat low impact, but a very low scoring. Next. Next, Jackie. Okay. Some comments we got, and I won't read all of these, but essentially they come down to we want more opportunities for the local agencies to have input. We need to start the process earlier so there's more chance for feedback. We need to not do this just once a year. We should do this more on a quarterly basis. There should be kind of continual input. We need not only calls, but if we can have some meetings. Anyway, it's just more about the quality of the input and how often it occurs. Who survey look through all of the suggestions that the eligible entities had and come up with these as sort of a summary. These are the things they heard most often. Obviously, strategies to engage diverse stakeholders, particularly other state government entities, not just the eligible entities, but involving some of the other state agencies. And this ties into what we heard when we looked at the linkages piece. Writing a state plan that involves some measurable outcomes, so people are really looking at those MPIs and figuring out how do we have a state plan that is stronger. Recording some of the webinars so that people can stay in touch with what's going on with the state plan. Wanting further training on, wanting us to provide some further training on how to involve the CAAs. And finally, the best practices, providing best practices for creating a process and most importantly a calendar, develop a state plan, disseminating the draft plan, conducting outreach and public opinions or public hearings, and incorporating input into the plan. And this is hopefully what you're going to hear about today. You're going to hear from some of the states that scored highly in this area, and hear some of what they do in terms of developing the state plan. Next. So here now from the states, and we have Adrian, Andy, Dawn, and Katie. And I think, who are we going to start with, Jackie, since Dawn's not quite here yet? Adrian, is Adrian prepared to start?
Well,
is Dawn here?
Yeah, Dawn actually said that she can hear us. So, Muska, can you unmute Dawn and see if we can hear her?
Good on our end.
Okay, so Dawn? Be a problem there. Okay, she had just chatted us and said that she could hear us, but for some reason we can't hear her. So Dawn, I know you can hear me, so you are muted on your end. So if you can mute from your end and then let us know. So we'll just move along and we will go to Adrian. So give me a minute and I'll just move quickly through Dawn's slides, and then Adrian, we will have you start. Are you ready?
I am when you are.
Oh, beautiful. Okay, so here you are. This is Adrian Angel from Illinois. So, Adrian, take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm an Angel. I'm from the state of Illinois. Here in Illinois, the CSBG program is located in the Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, and we're our own Office of Community Assistance. Within our office, we also have the LIHEAP and the Weatherization program. CSBG staff, we have some CSBG-specific staff, which is myself, the program manager, and I have an assistant program manager out of our Chicago office. And then we share 6 grant managers with the LIHEAP program. So part of the year they're out monitoring for LIHEAP, and part of the year they're out monitoring for CSBG. And we share 3 fiscal monitors who do the fiscal monitoring for all of our agencies for CSBG, LIHEAP, and weatherization. The reason there's only 3 of them is because all of our grantees, all of our CSBG grantees here in the state of Illinois also administer the LIHEAP program and the weatherization program. So I think there's a total of 36, well, I know there's a total of 36 CSBG agencies, and out of those, and there's a total of 39 LIHEAP agencies. So there's only 3 agencies that have LIHEAP that don't have CSBG. funding is a little over $33 million. So we have 36 community action agencies. 25 of them are private non-for-profits, and 11 of them are forms of government. We have one statewide migrant farmer organization that we fund with our discretionary dollars, and also fund our state association through a contract to provide training and technical assistance for us. To get into the state plan development, the first thing that we did is look at the model state plan and the various questions that we were asked on the model state plan. We chose into basically a Word document, and when we went through each question one at a time, and slightly tweaked each question to where they made sense to the community action agency, the CSBG grantee. So, for example, if the question said, what has state done to do this, you know, we'd ask it in a way that made sense to the grantee, so that it was it's funny to them. It asked in such a way that reflected what they did, you know, in regards to us. Then we did that. We sent the survey out to the entire network for them to take, and we had a really good response rate. If I remember correctly, we had something like 30 of the 36 agencies respond to the survey. So we did back then. We have changed the procedure for next year, or for 2018. We're conducting that survey twice a year, once in May and once in November. And the reason that we decided that we were going to move to conducting it twice a year is because we figured out that when we just conducted that survey once a year, the agencies were just responding on what they could remember at that time or what was going on at that time. For example, we was going through a budget quiz here in Illinois where we did have a state budget, and so a lot of their responses were negative to us when we surveyed them in August because their cash is being held up a little bit because of the fact that we didn't have a state budget, so they were upset with us a little bit there. So we decided we would move it and start surveying them twice a year. That way we could at least get two different times of the year for them to talk to us about it. So once all the results in, we had our state staff reviewed the surveys, and then what we did is we created a document that we started combining all of the like answers or similar answers, and we kept the little tally marks to track which had the most responses. And then that summary document that we created, we ordered them in the occurrences of responses in order, and used that to create kind of a summary document of the answers that we were going to respond to on our model state plan. Again, and once we completed that document, we shared that document with the network. We sent it out by email, and then we hosted a webinar to go over that document. And, but for 2018, we're actually going to do a procedure change on that. In addition to the email and webinar, and when we hold our annual application process meeting, that we're going to schedule a roundtable the day before that. This couple of hours just talking about that document with them. We've surveyed agencies and got their input back and then gave them feedback on it. The next thing we did is we went in and we answered all the questions on the state plan, and then we posted the draft state plan publicly. We also emailed the draft state plan to all of our agencies, and we conducted a public hearing in August to receive any additional comments. We typically don't ever receive any comments. We usually sit there for a couple of hours waiting for somebody to either call in or show up, and very seldom does anybody ever actually call or show up to give public comments. At that time, we would incorporate any public comments into the state plan, and then we would send that back out to our agencies, and at the same time we do that, we also submitted the state plan to ACS. So basically, throughout the entire process, we made sure that the agencies knew exactly what questions we had to answer for the state plan, and we gave them as much input as they were willing to give us on it. We got their input. We gave them feedback on the input that we received on the network as a whole, and gave them another chance to kind of respond to that, make sure that nothing was left out of that. And then once we communicated with them those couple of times, that's when we finally submitted our state plan.
Okay, I just had to unmute myself there for a second. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Adrian. And I mentioned at the beginning, if you have any questions for Adrian, write them down, or any of the other presenters, because we'll open it up for questions and responses when we've heard from all the presenters. So now I'm going to turn it over to Andy in Minnesota. So Andy, you're on.
Great. Good afternoon. Again, I'm Andy from Minnesota. A little bit about CSBG in our state. If we can slide. Several entities. There are 24 private community action agencies, nonprofits, and have 9 tribal grantees. We have 3 staff that work on community action specifically, and housed in the Department of Economic Opportunity, or OEO as we like to refer to it, and part of the Minnesota Department of Human Services. Is about $13.2 million a year. We do have a state fund, a companion fund to CSBG, so it's about 8.5 in federal funds and 4.7 in Minnesota Action. Those two have about the same activities allowable. Discretionary funds goes to the state office. Now into the state plan process, a lot of overlap with what Adrian said, but what we have decided to really focus on is communication, and then providing multiple opportunities to give feedback. So I'll talk a little bit about those 2 areas. In communication, we really feel like quality is important with communication, so we try months leading up to our community action board meetings, the association, provide regular updates and let them know that this is coming up, that we're submitting a state plan, and kind of give them a little overview of the process, and let's have discussion about that, about what it means. You know, I'm sure in their states has some turnover, executive directors, so there's a little bit of training that has to happen at that point about what the state plan is for. We also use email quite a bit, of course, to communicate in the months leading up to the draft, and then during any review or any hearing process or round tables and things like that, which I'll talk about. And then in person, we do a lot of different opportunities to try and just get in front of people and let them know this is happening, and here's what this means, and it's a public document. Trying to hit different groups, not just executive directors, but we do run tables at different state meetings and conferences that have overlap with community action. We've been to add video or phone capability as much as possible to a lot of these meetings so that people can call in if they need to. And then we kind of have steps that we go through. From releasing the form template, sharing the entire document as the template comes from the funder, so that they know that we have to fill this out and they can see the exact questions that we're working through. And we also share a draft. We kind of pre-populate the information that is known or things that are not going to change. A lot of the state plan doesn't change drastically from year to year, or at least it doesn't in Minnesota. So we're sure to pre-populate that and let them know that this is kind of what it looks like, and here's a couple places where we could use some input. I'll publish it in the state register. Was one of the requirements. We have been doing webinars in the last year or two. Try to do webinars that are geared for our tribal grantees and for our community action grantees, and we do that. I think we did that in June or July of this past year. And those are really informational, and then we collect questions and take feedback on certain sections during the webinars too. We did do a public hearing at the end of July. Not real well attended, but I think that's just kind of the way that goes. But we did, an improvement we made this year is we allowed for phone participation in the hearing. And I mentioned before, we tried a lot of roundtables. We found that roundtables were the best way. If you get a small group of people who are working on certain projects within community action, they're likely to be a little bit more energetic and a little bit better feedback. So in Minnesota, we have a fiscal directors roundtable. That's a quarterly meeting. There's an HR directors roundtable. There's a MIS focused roundtable. At the Action Conference, state conference, we had a roundtable. And so there was like a group of staff from community action agencies that were gathered. We tried to be there just for a real informal discussion of the state plan, and we probably got our best feedback and our best questions during roundtables. We also had everybody know when the state deadline, the deadline for the comment period was going to be, and then final document as we submitted it. Tried to make sure to, every time we made any change or significant change to the draft, we would send to the network so that everybody sees what we did, what changed, and let them know what changed. I mean, it's a big document, so I think another thing that I tried to do is kind of give them the Cliff's Notes version a little bit and let them know, okay, so on page 4, this is what we changed, and it was fairly significant or not. I think that was helpful to the network as well. And then last, we have used the state plan externally, really to assure transparency and accountability. Things we talk about it as a public document, especially with new executive directors or even with some of the older, the more tenured executive directors. It helps understand the process and the importance of it when you do it as a public document, and it will be on our Department of Services website. Our state association has been supportive of that with the website, and then outside of our networks, we kind of highlight the state plan as we let them know that, or let different groups know that it's a public document and it's a way that we ensure transparency, accountability, authority over certain things. We've had renation, we've had a merger in our state in the last couple of years. So these are ways we can point back to a document that shows how we're going to go about working through some of those things as they come up. And we do have, in spirit of continuous improvement, we do feel like we need to be better at some of these things as well. To create more opportunity for face-to-face discussion. As I said before, that was really, the roundtables were probably the best way to get information that we found. So we'd increase that or make those a little bit more, maybe more some sort of a meeting where they can help us with content. Accessibility is something we're always thinking about. We're trying to make sure there's a barrier to providing input on the state plan. I already mentioned roundtables, but that was new last year, just making an effort to have those different groups. And then to add to that, any new executive directors that we have in the state, we try to catch them for once a year executive director training, and we do that in partnership with our state association funders. And so we're going to add the two topics for the ED trainings. And another area that we thought we would look at is adding it to our site visitor monitoring items, so they know, they get a plan to us, we go and monitor the plan, and that this is our plan. So we're kind of all in the same boat here, and here's how we can do things through continuous improvement. And the other thing we do internally is during meetings with community action staff, we have a decision we need to make one way or the other about how we're going to do something. We often refer back to the state plan and say, well, what did we say we would do? So we don't do something different, or sometimes just a good way to go back and say, okay, we had that discussion last summer, and this is what we decided to do in terms of discretionary or something like that. And so a way to kind of grab ourselves and also have an answer for somebody if they ask for something. And we talk about that in our state plan, which is the public document. We said we would do this and that, and it's usually a good way to, it's a useful way to communicate strategies that we use in the state. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Andy. That was great. And as I mentioned, write down your questions. We'll get them at the end. I'm going to turn it over to Katie from Wisconsin. Katie, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes, we can.
Okay,
Beautiful.
excellent. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So, yeah, I can go to the next slide. I'm Katie Castron from Wisconsin. So CSBG in Wisconsin, what it looks like, we've got, we have 16 community action agencies, which are all private nonprofits. Then we have 2 limited purpose agencies that are statewide, and one of them is our runs migrant farm worker program, similar to Illinois. And then we have one current manager who oversees CSBG, and that's my position. And really just the only other staffing under CSBG is a small slice of my supervisor. And CSBG is located in our Department of Children and Families in the state, and weatherization and LIHEAP, other programs that work with our community action agencies are actually that's all handled by another state agency. So a little bit separate, a little different. And right now, Wisconsin's getting about $8.6 million in CSBG. Of that, we have our allocation are a little more than 3% for admin costs and about 4% in discretionary dollars. And discretionary all goes to 11 federally recognized tribal governments in the state. That's where our discretionary goes. Okay, next, please. State plan development, it was something we were rated pretty highly on the ACSI. It wasn't our highest area, but it was got good ratings, and they had gone up from 2015 to 2017. So we feel like we're on a good track there. So in terms of how we go about involving our eligible entities with developing the state plan, our first step, my office, which would be me, would develop the first draft of our state plan, and then I share it with our statewide network each May. So when our plans are due September 1, I would send the draft state plan out in the spring to our entire network, and then when our state association meets in May, they have their annual meeting, I discuss the plan in person with all of the executive directors, which make up our state association board. So you go through it and I'll take questions and comments at time. Okay, please. And then the second step would be to hold a conference call or webinar with the statewide network in early June to go over that first draft and get input. And I had agencies sometimes email me if they can't participate. We had 7 agencies that participated on that webinar and conference call in 2017, and a couple others gave me comments. Then step 3, we post the next draft of our state plan publicly. We put it on our website, send it to the state legislators, and hold a combined public and legislative hearing. By that time, our draft has incorporated a lot of input from the eligible entities. So we hold a hearing the past 2 times where we just have a few people in person. Usually it's the state association and a couple of our agencies participate really just in a supportive way. They've already given input, and at that point I've not seen any changes come from our work, and we haven't had any legislators. We've had some send staff, but they just kind of listen and then information that never have input. We had any the public come or give any input. So the state plan, the hearing is very quick. Honestly, it's probably take about 20 to 30 minutes. And the thing is that we share that final draft of our state plan with the network again after the public hearing. We post it on our website in the final form and then submit it by September 1. So we get a high rating, like I said, but we had some good comments or suggestions in the 2017. So we are planning to make a few changes. One thing people asked for was more review time next draft. So just making sure that we have plenty of time to review that draft state plan. And then also they were interested, they felt like they wanted more to be clear when my office made changes to the state plan based on input from entities. And we make several changes, and just to track it and let people know that making changes, I think that will be helpful to everybody to be able to see that process unfold, and also to it will really show how we are responsive, because the input they gave was pretty much all incorporated in the plan. I did have a request to schedule webinars to go over the draft state plan. That was our very first draft. We'll go over it by webinar. So I probably will make sure we schedule at least 2 webinars. And we didn't record our webinars. I'd have to work with our this year and really figure out how to do that, because our typical conference call and webinar system does not do recordings, but I know there's a way to do it. So we just would have to add that as an added feature so that people who can't participate would have plenty of time to go back and listen to a recording at their convenience. That is it for me.
Great. Thank you very much, Katie. So here's the contact information, and I did want to just say that you can see Dawn and Cherry's contact information from Idaho, and unfortunately Dawn was not able to get all on her end, so we couldn't figure out what the glitch was. So we've been Muska has been doing some trying to figure it out, but we weren't able to. So I'm just going to draw your attention as bear with me while I move back through the slides. I'm going to draw your attention to the ones from John, and so that you may want to review these. So I'll just go through them really quickly. So the grantee is the Idaho Department of Health and Welfare. There's the association. They have the Partnership of Idaho, and there are 7 community action agencies, and have the Farm Worker Organization as well. And they did, I remember when Dawn was talking about it over the summer with the smaller group, that they did enhance their state plan development process by creating a flow chart. So there is a slide of the flow chart that you'll be able to take a look at, and I thought it was very comprehensive. They work very closely with the state association, the Idaho State Office does. So the state association has a pretty primary role in helping the state office with the state plan and then getting the agencies involved. So they did establish a communication tool that convey the task plan, the state plan that has the tasks, the timelines, as well as the deadlines. So as you can see here is the state plan process. So see what the association is responsible for, as well as what the state office is responsible for. And as you can see, they provide the association with their draft state plan by April 15th. Then it gets distributed to the executive director, program managers. The association collects the comments and feedbacks and then provides the feedback to the state office, and then the process continues until the September 1st due date. So you could take a look at the specific pieces of the flow chart, but I had told Dawn that if any of you have any questions, if they reach out to her, and she said you absolutely can. So please go ahead and do that if you have any questions about any of the specific steps in the flow chart. But I did also want to let you know that at the conference, I think on Monday, actually, as part of the orientation, that we're going to be, I've been working with a couple of state offices of creating a state office calendar of activities. So, when the work flows and sort of when to start what processes. So a piece of that, of course, is the state plan development process. So that's going to be incorporated into the state calendar that we've created, that hopefully is a template and hopefully be useful to all of you. And for those of you who will be sharing that far and wide, so not only at the orientation, we'll also be sharing it at the core conference and then beyond that as well, but be looking for that to come out. And then this is the end of Dawn's. They maintain a focus on keeping the information on the tool concise, so it would be helpful to across all the level staff, and I think we've heard that from the other presenters as well. The tool has been well received by the network, and they're now operating with a better alignment statewide. And so that Dawn wasn't able to be with us, but again, if you have any questions, then please feel free to reach out and talk to her. And then I'm going to go back to the slides. There's contact slides. So there's Dawn's information, and Cherry works with Dawn. And then you can also see Adrian's, Andy's, and Katie's there as well. So now I think we'll go to any questions that you may have. So I see we have some there. So let me find them. Let me read them out, and then we'll allow any of, so Adrian and Katie and Andy, if any of you want to chime in to answer these questions, that would be great. All right, so there's a question. I'm curious about the timeline to develop the state plan from beginning to end. With words roundtable surveys to vetting internally within the state agency, to public hearing, creating the final product to submit to OCS, so all those are pieces of it, how long would the state say it takes? So from beginning to end, how long does it take for all of you to develop the state plan by September 1st?
So Adrian from Illinois, I can address that a little bit, how we would here in Illinois. We at the state plan more as a living document. And we're going to that more by having the getting feedback and input multiple times throughout the year. year. First year that we did it, take a little bit long developing the questionnaire and compiling the responses and providing feedback to the agencies. But as we have that data, each year it gets a little bit easier and easier to do because we're just revising the document that we've already created. So it's a living document, and what we submit in September is just a snapshot of where we are in September of that year. Makes sense.
Okay. Yes, it sounds like you've been integrating it with other processes that happen throughout the year, so you don't necessarily have a beginning point in time.
Correct.
Okay, great. So what, Andy, you and Katie?
Yeah, we're gonna have it as integrated into other processes as Illinois does, but I would say in general it's probably 5 to 6 months when we talk about all the roundtables and the webinars and kind of intensive management of seeing that process from start to finish. I would say 6 months.
Oh,
yeah, I would say we have to start. Yeah, we're not as integrated, but it's also like Adrian was saying, it's gotten a lot quicker as they changed the state plan model, and then it stayed similar. So it has built. Say we start in March for getting it ready for September 1. I have to back out from our internal review process, and approval process takes so long that it really is kind of like we have to have our public and legislative hearing in early July in order to meet the September 1 due date. So it's, process, but a lot of that's waiting for the approval process, actually writing.
Right, wait for the state waiting for your internal approval process.
Which,
yeah.
To
kind of work from the end back, or from the end forward.
Yeah.
Thank you all. And then another question. Oops, I just lost it. Here we are. Because the new model state plan, so that's, of course, we know that is under comment, will not be finalized until May, June. What format will you be using as a draft plan to share with your entities?
I can say we not a year we're doing our state plan, so our next one will be due in September of 2019. But time around, I just had to use the draft to get started because we couldn't wait for the state plan model to be finalized. We wouldn't have it done in time, so I just worked with the draft. And really, the changes were very minimal, so it worked out okay.
This is Adrian. I agree with Katie. That's how we've always done it. We always utilize the recent information that we have at our hands whenever we got to do the surveys or start preparing. And I guess we kind of cross ours and hope it doesn't substantially change. And if we do identify any changes, then it's just those changes that we reach back out to the agencies on.
Yeah, same in Minnesota. We won't be doing ours until next year as well, but then we'll check in some point halfway through the 2-year plan and make sure we're doing what we do.
Okay, all right. And I think we're anticipating there's not going to be lots of changes to the state plan. So we'll see. Okay, another question. Someone wants to, how can I print the slides? There's another question before that too. Okay, so we will send out in the Director's Digest the recording as well as the slides. So the Director's Digest, which they say Tuesday. So we have that for all of you in the Director's Digest tomorrow. There's another one. Are any of the states in Group B who are on the phone right now, who are in Group B with an approved 2-year plan that's in effect for 2019? And if yes, what will you be doing to get input and feedback for this year? To the group, does anybody have any? You can check what you're doing. We could talk about that too. Tables at the NASCAS conference.
Group is that means it's the 2-year plan and that just started, right? Yeah. So that's kind of like what I say. I think we'll probably play through here, try and get some input, and just make sure we're on track.
Okay, so full-fledged process then.
Not completely sure about that. I think we still need to discuss what we're going to do with that process.
Okay. Might be a good question for the CBG, the roundtables, member roundtables that we have at our conference. I'll share some feedback with others. So I don't see any other questions. Do you, Muska, see any questions from your end that I can't find?
That's it for the questions.
Okay. All right. Perfect.
Jackie, this is Kate.
Hi, Kate.
I have one thought or one question. Aidan, I'm wondering if you'd be willing or if it's possible for you to send Jackie so we could post the survey template that you use, because you went through some work of putting in plain language some of the questions from the state plan, and use that to survey your eligible entities. Would you be willing to share that?
Yeah, I can forward the exact email that we sent out to all the agencies with the most recent request to her.
Terrific, because I think maybe some other states can just use that. That would be great. Thanks, Adrian.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. If there's other questions, then I just want to bring your attention, just a second here, to the last upcoming, well, there's 2 upcoming best practice webinars. We have 2 left. So next week on January 22nd, we have our training and technical assistance webinar at from 2 to 3:30, and that's the Eastern time zone. And the very last one, we're combining the use of discretionary funds and the distribution of funds. So that's going to be on January 29th from 3 to 4:30, also in the Eastern time zone. Anybody have any questions? Any final questions? Well, hope you've been able to take some ideas. I think that all the presenters gave us some great ideas of what to do, some strategies and examples and approaches that you can take. I think we learned that communication is key, lots of communication and often. And I think one of the things that was the takeaway for me was making the connection between what you've heard, even throughout the year and at roundtables and at other times that may not even be part of the time that you're actually focused on the state plan, and letting the agencies know that you've incorporated those comments and being able to point those out and showing what changes that you've made in the state plan based on their feedback. Okay. Well, with that said, thank you all very much, and we hope to see you on January 22nd, and have a great week.